All right, good evening. It is 7:07. I apologize for the slow start. We had a little bit of a technical delay, but we are up and running for the Lunenburg Finance Committee public hearing on Thursday, October 13th at the Lunenburg Town Hall. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. It is not being recorded on Facebook Live today. So there is no public access via Facebook, but it is on the local broadcast network access channel. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link attached in the agenda for a Zoom conference, or you can telephone dial in, dialing toll-free 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 792-737-0353. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. At this point, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from the committee?
No.
Okay. The only thing that I will note is that we do have a technical quorum. One of our members is currently on vacation, and our fourth member, Tom Baelish, is on the Zoom call. So we will have to do a roll call vote until he arrives at Town Hall when we do any of our voting. Is there any public comment from the public? Mr. Passios.
Yes, thank you. I'm assuming you guys can hear me clearly. Because of limited availability this evening, I'd like to give my capital planning report as a public comment. It'll be very brief. The committee met a couple weeks ago, and I led that meeting to reorganize the committee. The committee voted to appoint Tom Alonzo as chair, myself remaining as vice chair, and Peter Beardmore as clerk. That was pretty much the business of the evening. The proposals for capital projects from the department heads were due in today, and we will start reviewing them next Monday. That's my report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on co-chair.
Thank you.
Any other public comments from the public? Seeing none. For the chair's report, the only thing that I really have today is just what Madam Town Manager spoke to me about slightly before, about the last two select board meetings, as a recommendation to go back and watch them for members of the public who are interested in the special town meeting warrant articles. Apparently the bodies that submitted articles came forward and spoke about them, and that would be a good place to get some information directly regarding each one of the actual articles themselves. With that, there has been a slight amendment that went out this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Simeone. He reminded me that our public hearing said that we would start the public hearing at 7 p.m. and not at the end of the meeting. So we are going to start the public hearing now. And this will be to go over and review and then vote on recommendations or what the Finance Committee would like to do for the specific articles for a special town meeting. So I don't think we need to have a vote to open the public hearing, but I will just declare that it is now open. And we can begin with the articles. So, Madam, do you want to read through them yourself, or what's your preference?
You want to read them, and then I can just answer.
Sure. Let me just open up so I can share it. And
I would just remind everyone, this is still a draft warrant. The select board has not signed the official warrant, and that will happen on Tuesday.
So is this the order they're going to appear in, or is that going to change?
This is the recommended order,
Recommended order?
and numbering dependent on if any are taken off the warrant or not.
Yeah, okay.
all right. We are up. And we are zoomed in. Okay, so we'll just take these through, I suppose, one at a time. So we'll start with Article number 1, which reads to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds all sums of money necessary to amend the amounts voted for the town's FY 2023 budget under Article 8 of the May 7th, 2022 town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto.
Okay. This article is an annual article at our special town meeting to make any budget adjustments for the current fiscal year. At this time, we don't have finalized a chart of the changes yet, but there are some that are known. The Historical Commission has asked for funding to supplement their budget because they would like to pay for the 50% towards a grant they would like to apply for through Mass Historical Commission. So in that amount, the 50% on the town appropriation side would be $12,500. In the town manager's budget, we're looking to do an employee climate survey. Right now, I just have a estimate of $15,000. I'm working on getting quotes for that, so I expect it will come in less than that. The assessors, this is, I previously spoke about this earlier in the budget season, that this would be an expected expense. They need to do data collection this year to catch up on the number of parcels for their 10-year cyclical inspections, or that's called their measure and list, where they go, the consultant goes door to door. So that has to be done. All our properties have to be done in a 10-year cycle, visited every 10 years. So that cost, as well as a revaluation, that will be an additional $45,000 between those two. In the planning board budget, the APDC, the last 2 years have missed the deadline to submit for budget costs. They're looking for administrative costs, and that amount is $5,000.
So a total of $77,500 roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And do we expect, other than obviously your $15,000 that is still going out for quotes, the other numbers are likely to be at least relatively close to that?
Correct.
A small amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I would recommend the board defer on this.
Get the
Till
actual
we get the-
numbers.
Yes. Yep.
Any discussion?
No.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to defer until town meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, it will be a roll call vote. Let me pull Tom back up. Mr. Baelish, if you could unmute. Motion.
Aye. Yeah.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
And an aye from myself. We will defer to town meeting. All right, Article 2 reads to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of money for payment of prior year's expenses or take any other action relative thereto.
Right. So that amount is known. It's $1,804.54. There's 2 prior year expenses, and one related to fire department, a payroll expense that was discovered this year, as well as a $25 invoice that was came in after July 1st this year.
Those are the 2?
Yes.
Okay. So it's primarily the fire department payroll?
Yes.
All right. Any discussion, any questions?
No. Make a motion, motion to approve.
Second?
All right. Any discussion? I think so. Mr. Baelish?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
And an aye from myself. We are 4-0 to recommend approval. All right, Article 3. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to fund the first year of the FY23, FY24, and FY25 Lunenburg Police Officers Collective Bargaining Agreement dated July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025 with the New England Police Benevolent Association Local 353, or take any other action relative thereto.
So this item, the committee will have to defer tonight, just because the select board has yet to vote on the memorandum of agreement. We were hoping to get that done in time for tonight, but there were some language updates that needed to be done.
And we won't be able to know the number until that's
Right.
signed off on.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. All right,
I recommend we defer.
Second?
any discussion? All right, motion has been made and seconded to defer. Mr. Baelish?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
And an aye from myself. We are deferred 4-0. All right, Article 4, to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money to the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund or take any other action relative thereto.
So Articles 1, 4, and 5 are kind of interconnected. So we have we're waiting on our final new growth number that has to be submitted. So knowing the final amount available is relative to that certification of new growth. So our estimate, additional new growth beyond our estimate from annual town meeting is another $21,203. And based on the town meeting surplus where we ended, there was $186,044.92. Add in the additional new growth, the change in cherry sheets that came after town meeting. There's an estimated $261,664.92 that will be available to be appropriated at town meeting. So some of that money will be funded under Article 1, and Article 4, usually whatever is remaining, we put in special purpose stabilization. But we also have Article 5, which is asking for funding for the engineering for Marshall Park, which they're also waiting for a more definitive engineering estimate. So depending on what we have available, those are all connected.
Is there a possibility that Article 5 would be funded by ARPA funding?
That was a request as well.
Okay.
So they did submit
So
that
if
as a
that is-
project request.
Will that likely be decided on before a special town meeting?
No, the select board did discuss all the ARPA submissions at one of their last meetings, and the next time they will be discussing it will be November 1st. But they're going to determine a process and how they're going to evaluate all the requests. So I do not expect them to have any final recommendations on ARPA by the 15th.
Okay. Are we able to change where this funding comes from after the fact if they decide to devote a large sum of money or any sum of money to the Marshall Park plan?
So
Or we
if,
have to wait until town meeting for that?
you mean if we vote on Article,
If we vote to approve Article 5 to come out of the surplus funds, and then the select board, later after the special town meeting, approves or decides to spend, even if it's $50,000 on the Marshall Park plan, can that be recouped and then
Transferred.
reappropriated? Or do we have to wait for town meeting?
we would have to wait for town meeting
Okay,
to reappropriate that funding.
okay.
Yep.
What was the total number again that you had? I missed that last one, 200 and...
261,664.92. But like I said, that's an estimate because we're waiting on the new growth.
When do you expect the new growth by?
Hopefully submitted by next week.
Okay.
But you'll hear from the assessor tonight, right?
You can ask
So,
TJ directly.
but that's what I anticipate.
Okay. Is there a motion to make on this one?
Recommend we defer.
Yep. We're talking about Article 4, yes. I second.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded to defer. Mr. Baelish?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
And an aye from myself. We will defer Article 4.
Article 5, probably the same.
Yeah, I don't see Article 5 taking too long. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from any available funds, or from available funds, a sum of money for the property known as the Marshall Park, 100 Chestnut Street, shown in Assessor's Map 60, Lot 18, and for final engineering and design, recreation/open space services area at this property, including all costs related or incidental thereto, or take any other action relative thereto. It's a tough one. Anything to add on this one? Just what you said already?
You're right.
Okay.
The Park Commission, I know, is meeting next Wednesday. So I'm sure this will be on their agenda as well.
Okay, and I assume they'll be likely to give a presentation or something at.
Some information.
At town meeting. Okay, a slide or two or something like that, okay. Is there a motion to recommend?
Recommend we defer.
Second?
Right, any conversation? Mr. Baelish? We didn't quite hear your answer, Mr. Baelish. There was a motion to defer.
Aye.
Okay, heard you. Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
And aye for myself. We will defer 4-0. Article 5. All right, Article 6. Excuse me. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $1,645.60 into the Sewer Reserve Capacity Stabilization Fund, or take any other action relative thereto.
This is an annual article as well, this article and the next article by the Sewer Commission. This article, I'll just read the description from the sewer business manager. Reserve capacity fees are collected for only those accounts that were not accounted for in the original sewer design. They receive a privilege fee assessment upon connection to sewer, and therefore should the receiving cities, which are Leominster and Fitchburg, ever charge us for additional capacity not accounted for at the time that the respective IMAs, intermunicipal agreements, were drawn up, we will have a stabilization fund set aside for these additional costs. As these monies were collected and not used in fiscal '22, we transfer them to a stabilization fund to hold for just such a purpose when it arises.
Do we have any idea what's currently sitting in the Sewer Reserve Capacity Stabilization Fund?
I asked that question. It's very... $26,285.69.
And have we, since we started setting up that fund, have we ever had to actually draw from it due to an increase from Pittsburgh and Leominster?
So in fiscal, for the fiscal '23 budget, 20,962 was transferred from that account as part of their budget.
Okay, due to an increase.
Just because it was an available source of funding.
Okay.
So they transferred money in, transferred it out into the budget.
So it's not specifically for, it's not absolutely earmarked for that increase?
Right, there was not the need for it.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
No.
Entertain a motion to recommend.
Recommend approval.
I'll second.
Right, we have a recommendation to approve. Roll call vote. Mr. Baelish,
He's on mute.
you're still on mute.
He's coming in.
Maybe walking up the stairs. Mr. Gray? Start there.
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
Aye from myself. Give Mr. Baelish just a half a minute.
And there he is.
How do you vote?
No problem.
No problem. So if you missed it, we are on Article 6 to see if we will transfer $1,645.60 into the Sewer Reserve Capacity Stabilization Fund, which we do on a yearly basis, in preparation for an increase in expenses from the Pittsburgh and Leominster Sewer Department. The recommendation is to approve. Just need your vote.
Yes, hi.
Okay.
Sorry, I shut my car down, I lost my speaker on. So it signed me out.
No problem at all.
Sorry about that.
All right. Well, I will make a note now that we no longer need to do roll call votes, which is nice. We can just move on to the simple majority. All right, Article 7, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $9,900 into the Sewer Inflow Infiltration Stabilization Fund or take any other action relative thereto.
Okay. This article is another annual article at the special town meeting, and I'll read from the sewer business manager. The Sewer Commission was required, per the terms of the IMA with Leominster, to put into place a sewer bank fee for inflow and infiltration, I&I, remediation by a Leominster ordinance, which the state of Massachusetts had required of them. Every town and city in Massachusetts is required by the state to show efforts to reduce I&I, and this fund is set aside to help fund these costs. As these monies were collected and not used in FY22, we transfer them to a stabilization fund to hold for just such a purpose if that arises.
Just for consistency, I'll ask for what's the amount in that button?
It was $21 and I think 13 cents.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll put quite a bit more in. Any questions, any comments?
No.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Recommend we approve.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, vote is to recommend approval. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any against?
Aye.
All right, we are recommending approval 4-0. All right, Article 8. All right, to see if the town will accept the provision contained within Mass General Law, Section 3242B, written as such. Quote, for a reserve or permanent intermittent police officer or a reserve, permanent intermittent or call firefighter retiring from a governmental unit, accepting the provisions of this sentence, the board shall credit in addition to the 5 years of credit allowed pursuant to the preceding sentence as 1 day of full-time service each day in any year which is subsequent to the 5th year following said appointment, and on which a reserve or permanent intermittent police officer or a reserve permanent intermittent or call firefighter was assigned to and actually performed duty as a reserve or permanent intermittent police officer or reserve, permanent intermittent or call firefighter, provided, however, that such service as a permanent intermittent or call firefighter shall be credited only if such firefighter was later appointed as a permanent member of the fire department, provided further that this sentence shall take effect in a city by vote of the city council in accordance with its charter, in a town which maintains a separate contributory retirement system by vote of the town meeting, in a town whose eligible employees are members of the county retirement system of the county wherein such town lies, by vote of a town meeting and by acceptance by the county commissioners of said county, in a district which maintains a separate contributory retirement system by vote of the district meeting, in a district the eligible employees of which are members of a county retirement system by vote of the district meeting and by acceptance of the county commissioners of said county, close quote, or take any action relative thereto.
A mouthful.
That was tough. One sentence. That was impressive.
All right. So this is someone else who came before at the select board's meeting, Lieutenant Christos Lakadigas. And essentially, so this is a local option of this Mass General Law. So automatically, police officers are able to get credit beyond 5 years of service. But firefighters in this law, the town has to locally accept, as well as our county retirement system has to vote on this, which they have to allow this. So this would allow firefighters who were part-time on-call firefighters only within Lunenburg, not in another town, to buy back that service beyond 5 years if they become full-time. So we have about 4 firefighters in our department who are now full-time, who had prior year service as on-call. So they would be allowed to buy back that credible service. So it's something that they would have to pay into. The effect on the town would be on our retirement assessment, and that I'm still waiting for information. I've requested from Worcester County Retirement to see what that impact is, see if they can calculate that out. If we give them the scenario and the 4 eligible people, when they would be able to retire and how that would impact the town. I also contacted our actuarial for other post-benefit, other post-employee benefits, OPEB, and he said that it would be very minimal of that impact in our OPEB costs. It really comes down to our assessment, and that people would be eligible to retire earlier with more years of service. But it's prorated based on their hours that they were on call.
Is this a new thing, or is this something that we just hadn't either known about or necessary to enact?
I didn't see when this particular section was enacted by the state, but I know a variety of other communities have adopted it. But it requires the retirement board to also accept it.
If this doesn't pass, what happens?
They would not be eligible to buy back beyond the 5 years.
Because it's an option specifically, it's not,
Right.
even though it's in Mass General Law, it's not a requirement.
No, because it tells you that we have to vote on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And how difficult of a request is that going to actually be of the actuary to get an estimate of, I assume it's just going to be on those 4 officers?
Right.
Okay.
They would be the only eligible ones.
Okay, so that's actually able to be calculated, but moving forward, we would just calculate that into their, I suppose, numbers that they come into us with for.
Right, when we are up to do our OPEB, actuarial costs, that would become part of it
Okay.
if this were enacted.
Okay.
or accepted.
Any other questions? Right, entertain a motion.
I would recommend we defer to town meeting.
Is there a second?
Defer, are we gonna get an actual figure? Is that, okay, yeah, okay.
Ideally.
That's the hope.
I'll second
Yeah,
that.
I've asked for it.
Any conversation? Just kind of piggybacking off of that, what happens if we don't have a number? Is it likely we'll just try and skip over it? Or we'll just try and prove it as is?
Oh, that would be, I guess, yeah, up to the town.
Okay. Select board doesn't have an opinion at this point for if we don't have a number?
I think they would prefer a number. They want to see the
Right.
impact as well.
Okay. All right, motion's made and seconded to recommend deferment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? We are unanimous. All right, moving on to Article 9. To see if the town will vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Chapter 70, Section 70A, 70 through 8, I assume? Is that 70 through 8, 78, or just 70-A?
70-8.
70-8A, entitled, quote, Salary Administration Plan, close quote, Schedule A as follows. Does this need to then go into quote somewhere? Or is it the entire section that's being amended?
No, these are the positions that are being added to the comp plan.
Okay. Schedule A as follows. The position of Administrative Assistant, IT, to be added and assigned to grade 8. The position of Facilities Director to be added and assigned to grade 16. The position of Civilian Traffic Member to be added and paid at the sergeant overtime rate per Local 353, or take any other action relative thereto.
So these positions all exist and are part of the budgeted year for fiscal '23. The Personnel Committee has already approved these positions at these grades. This is just part of a requirement of the bylaw that it be voted at the next town meeting. So there's no financial impact.
No impact.
Okay. Any questions?
So, I'm sorry, so these positions were approved, were they approved at town meeting last time? Sorry.
So the process is that new positions come before the Personnel Committee. They're recommended at a certain grade. The Personnel Committee votes on them to assign them that grade. And all of these positions are already in the budget, so there's funding for these positions. This is just to amend the grid.
Okay,
That's part of the personnel bylaw.
okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, there's no financial impact.
Which we can vote on.
Right,
It seems right to me.
yeah. I'll second that no financial impact.
All right, motion's made and seconded to find no direct financial impact. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, we are unanimous, no direct financial impact. Article 10. To see if the town will vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Chapter 81, by adding a new section, 11, titled, quote, Amending Capital Appropriations, end quote, by inserting the following, quote, amending capital appropriations, warrant articles, and floor motions shall not restrict town meeting voters' ability to propose and approve amendments in totality, description, and/or scope to individual items or projects in capital appropriation articles and motions. Notwithstanding the above, amendments shall not limit the town manager's authority to reapply capital funds among the individual items and projects in the capital plan, nor shall town meeting be authorized to increase the total capital plan appropriation printed in the warrant, or take any other action relative thereto. We will need a close quote after warrant, just before this goes out. want to speak on this one, or would you like me to?
It's the Finance Committee's article, I
Sure.
think.
So this was submitted by the Finance Committee in direct reference to I wouldn't call it necessarily an issue, but a conversation that came up at annual town meeting in the spring, where there were some questions about specific items in the capital plan. And after some discussion and some debate, it was decided that as it stands and as the charter is written, we are, as a town, not able to specifically amend items within the capital plan itself once it's been approved by the capital plan committee and town manager, and I believe the select board as well. Does the select board actually approve the capital plan before? They don't, correct?
No.
They just recommend.
It's presented to them.
Just capital planning and town manager, okay. So this amendment just seeks to offer the ability for the legislative body to at least make small adjustments to or change capital items within the budget itself. And I'm sure we will have a commentary on this at special town meeting. Are there any questions regarding this? Okay. I will entertain a motion on this one.
Well, I'd recommend we defer to town meeting. I don't believe there's an,
Well, it's our, we submitted it.
Yeah, I think that,
right. Well, then recommend approval.
is there a second?
So I think if I can just kind of get in my head straight where we are, I think this is our article.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we have a couple options. We can support it, recommend approval, right? Or I guess we could, as Jay was saying, we could defer and, take the position that we wanted to bring this up and have the town meeting discuss it. But I'd be interested in what the other committee members think, and are we 100% supportive of this? Do we have any, is this, or are we looking for feedback from the town and others on whether we think this should pass or not, I guess?
I think when we were discussing it at prior meetings, I always, in my mind, in what I said, understood why we were talking about this, what we're trying to accomplish. I always thought, and this seems to meet what we need to do, but I also think that if there is a better way to do it, I would be willing to listen and support that, if I could see that. But again, I do see that there could be this could create some controversy in a town meeting, maybe not this one or the next one. 10 years from now, there might be one. And, the capital committee, which Dave Passio was talking about at the beginning of the meeting, they spent a lot of time on this, and there was a process set up at the time by whoever set it up. I'd like to hear more about that. But I think this does serve the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, so it's fine. But if there's a better suggestion, I would support that. But I don't know of one, and I haven't heard of one.
Anything else, Mr. Simeoni?
Yeah, I support the article. I think the taxpayers should have the right to make adjustments to the capital plan. I think for the most part, everybody supports the capital plan. But now with the capital plan, the amount of items that are on there being recommended and the financial amount, I'm sure from time to time, there may be controversy on some of the items. And similar to how the budget goes, and we can have the ability to make adjustments to line items on the budget, even though it's very rarely done. The taxpayers should have the ability to make those recommendations if they feel something needs to be changed. And I'm sure this will be well, discussed on town meeting floor, just like any budget item is.
So I would repeat the sentiment of my colleagues for sure. My thought with having a vote on it tonight is just to have it, so we have at least a stance that the Finance Committee has taken prior to, and so that it's in the warrant itself. I agree, given that the Select Board voted to put the article in the warrant, however, they are split as to whether or not they support the article. I'm sure that there will be discussion brought up at the time, which would give us then the chance to speak up at the same time and present our opinions and whatnot. But I would think that it would at least look more supported by the Finance Committee if we were to recommend approval ahead of time. But I am happy to vote on any way, shape, or form. Whether we defer, it makes no difference to me, honestly.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to say I'll recommend approval if you want to make a comment.
If I can make one more comment. So I can see both sides of this,
Right.
and I think maybe we probably all can, or many of us can. I am going to support it, and I'll vote to support it tonight. But as Tom said, it's not black and white. I can see the arguments on both sides. I think I'm persuaded by what Jay said and what Peter said in the past too, about the legislative body of the town meeting having a say on this. And I realize it's, I have a lot of faith in the people going through the process of the capital planning committee and the town manager, et cetera. I do think it's a good check though. And so I'll support I don't know if you made an amendment, Jay. If you did, I'll second that amendment to approve. Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there any other conversation, questions? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we are unanimous. And I agree, it's going to be tricky to amend it, I think, but Mr. Gray, I agree, if there is something else that's written up that conveys sort of the same sentiment but is written slightly differently, I'm certainly open to it as well. I'm in agreement that the legislative body should have at least the authority to do something if they wanted to. Not that they likely would, given that we do have a town manager and a capital planning committee that are highly competent and able to go through these processes ahead of time.
Agreed.
All right, moving on to Article 11. To see if the town will vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Section 250-4.1G, which is a section of the protective bylaw entitled, quote, Use Table, close quote, by changing 4.1K10 motel in the commercial district from, quote, Y to, quote, SP-Z, close quote, or take any other action relative thereto.
Adam Burney would say it best. So if you watched that meeting, on the select board meeting where he discussed this article, to get more thorough description of the article, but essentially it's changing the designation on the use table to require a special permit for motel.
And an SP-Z requires special permit, whereas a Y does not?
Right.
Okay. Simple enough.
And there's not so motels are, at this point, they're approved, or how does it work today?
So I'd have to look at the use table. I think that's it'd be by zone that they are allowed by right.
Okay.
So this would make it a requirement that they would have to get a special permit regardless. So,
Do you see any financial impact from this one for us?
that's a stretch.
Right. if we have one, then there's a permit fee that would be paid, which would go
Right,
to
if
the
someone were
town.
looking to open up a motel, it could have a negative impact by not allowing it by right, but that's kind of a stretch, I think.
It's simply changing the
But
code,
it's not,
Right.
it's not an impact on the budget,
right?
No,
right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, those-
Yeah, it seems to me no direct financial impact.
exactly,
I would assume as well.
yeah.
A motion,
Yeah, I'll move no direct financial impact.
second, anywhere?
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded for no direct financial impact. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Are unanimous. All right, Article 12. To see if the town will vote to override the denial of certificate to alter by the Architectural Preservation District Commission for repairs/alterations to the building exterior and vestibule of the Ritter Memorial Building located at 960 Massachusetts Ave, map 71, parcel 74, per the Code of Lunenburg, Chapter 113, Section 13, or take any other action thereto.
great. So I don't know if everyone's been paying attention to this project. So one of our capital projects was building envelope repairs to the Ritter building and to the town hall. So we had submitted 2 applications, certificate to alter for both of these buildings because they fall within the Architectural Preservation District Commission district. And the town hall application was approved, but the Ritter application was denied based on the windows. They'd like to see us repair or restore the windows, the existing windows. So the select board are kind of taking a 2-prong approach of putting this article on to, the bylaw allows town meeting to override that decision if it's in the best interest of the town, and also going back before the APDC. So I just went to the APDC meeting last week, and as well as our facilities director, and Selectman Alonso was there as well, and we discussed this application. So we're trying to work with them as well for information that they're seeking. It would have to be an entirely new application. They've already issued their denial, and it's past the required 90 days. So we're kind of hopefully can resolve this with information we can provide them, showing that the energy savings in putting in replacement windows that look historical, as well as the cost if we were to restore the original windows.
At our last meeting, you had mentioned that they were attempting to do a cost savings analysis. Has that been completed at all?
On the windows themselves, the facilities director is working on getting information relative to that.
Okay. Do we have any sort of a number for what the cost is for the window replacement, or what the select board is suggesting versus what the APDC is suggesting, if there's a cost difference between the two?
That's not known right now because we haven't been able to put this out to bid. It's all required on, because a lot of the other work that's involved is surrounding the windows, and so it's related to it.
Would it still be theoretically covered by what was appropriated at town meeting?
The historical restoration, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be an increase,
We
like,
didn't-
it wouldn't likely be an increase
Yeah.
otherwise, other than inflationary or something like that.
Right, unless the replacement costs or repair costs, if that were the route, was significantly more, that allowed us not to do the project at all.
Okay. Will any of those numbers hopefully be available before November 15th?
I'm not sure. I know the facilities directors, he met with someone this week, so he's working on it.
Okay. Any other questions?
So they didn't, I know, I have very limited knowledge of things like this, but what I do know is that there are certain windows that look architecturally like an old window but isn't. They didn't say that, they just said fix the ones you got, and that's all
Correct.
they would do.
Right. Our, because we had an architect draw up specifications, and that was part of our submittal package to the APDC. And the specifications call for a window that's through the National Historical Institute, I think is the window they recommend. It's a
Looks
historical
wavy.
window
Basically.
that would look similar to the windows that are there. And that was, their position is that even if it were to look historical, it's not the same. It degrades the historical integrity of the building by not being the original windows.
To what extent are they looking to have the windows repaired? I mean, are they looking to have the frames taken out and individual panels put into new window frames, or is it just?
That would have to be part of an assessment for each individual window, because there's, some windows, I can't think of the term, the pulley,
Yeah.
the pulleys, I think, that hold the weights in the windows, that could be what needs to be repaired. The frames themselves, like, it could be a variety of
Just wonder if the
costs,
repairs,
as well as the storm windows. That's a big component as well. That the storm windows is outside the purview of the APDC, but that's what would give, if we had to keep the original windows, that's what would make them more efficient.
wonder during the repair process, if you're replacing enough stuff, at what point do you no longer have the original window? And did it make more sense just to replace the window?
I'm not sure.
That's the
That's not my
Exactly.
specialty.
You don't have the
That's
answer
why
for
we
that?
hire someone else.
It's,
So has money already been appropriated for
Yes.
this work?
Last capital.
Last capital.
And how
The
much was-
Current, that's probably fiscal 22.
Two? And how much was that?
Have to go back. Because there were two projects related to the Ritter. The ADA ramp, and the building envelope project.
I mean, to me, it seems like there's, there is some financial impact here, but is it really, I guess I'm just trying to discern, is it large enough to,
over,
Well,
you
is
know,
there a
if-
budget impact?
Right, is there a budgetary impact? That's a big
yeah,
question.
if the windows aren't as efficient, the single pane windows that are there aren't as efficient as newer windows, then of course it's gonna cost more to heat and obviously, those kind of things. So, yeah, it would have an
Well,
effect.
that'd be more indirect as opposed on the actual budget.
So between the two projects, because they're one bid package, because they're related, the work is tied in together, is $227,500.
For both?
For-
doing the-
for
the
both.
ramp
The-
and doing the
yep.
windows?
Well, and other building.
Envelope work.
Yep.
Okay.
Is the ADA ramp also denied then at this point if they're denying or they approved the vestibule, correct? Is that part of the vestibule?
Their denial was specific to the windows.
Okay.
So they recommended if we kept the original windows as part, or restored the original windows, that the application would move.
But because it is all lumped together into one application, that means that the whole thing is denied?
Right now,
at this
it's all
point?
at a standstill because it's all interconnected
Okay.
work to be done.
Even the ramp?
Right, because the ramp is affecting the front of the building. Because it's going to change the vestibule area and make it ADA compliant there as well.
So if this does not pass, and if And you would have to then go back and put in a different permit or request, I
Application.
suppose, where you have to break everything out, potentially.
That's, yeah, to be decided.
Depends on how the select board wants to act at that point. Okay. Any other questions? Torn on this one. But I would entertain it.
Yeah, no financial impact from a budgetary standpoint.
Well, they can't spend any more money on the capital side, but in future budgets, it might be more to heat. That's the only thing I can see of. And that's, would it, so that would, to me, be a financial impact, even if it's relatively small, it still would be a financial impact.
But couldn't the town manager reallocate some other capital funds to do the project even if it was more expensive?
Within that capital plan year,
The 22?
if they were available.
Which we're already really tight on, I believe, correct? Or not tight, but we've.
But they're not asking for money.
Yeah, they're
in
not
this
asking for
article.
money. They're not saying, give us another 10 grand to.
Right.
but- So,
So we have a motion to recommend no direct financial impact. Is there a second for that? We can vote on it. If that doesn't pass, we can then vote for, or we can make another motion if necessary.
You know, kind of with what Tom said, it kind of is financial impact, but it's maybe small. I don't know. I mean, I'll probably vote for this, frankly. It's just as a finance committee, what do I think? I don't know. Do you have a view? Does it seem just as far as the financial impact, just without the pros or cons of the decision?
Direct financial impact, that's hard to ascertain without
Yeah.
knowing the assessment of the historic windows and what that cost would be versus the replacement. One of the things that was discussed at that meeting, which the APDC fully understands, is that this could end up costing or jeopardize the buildings even more if we decide not to move forward on these projects because of, hold up like this, it further deteriorates the buildings by prolonging the repairs that are needed. So it could cost the town more in the end. But that's not, I would say, a direct financial impact. It's just a potential impact, financial impact.
So it seems we could do no direct financial impact. We could defer,
or we could just approve it.
or we could approve.
Or we could recommend not to approve.
We could
We have lots of options.
I mean, I'm like Tom, I personally think this should get done. Only because if the town makes a rule and we break it, then why do we have the rule? Right? So some other person who lives in the district who wants to put up, good windows that look perfectly fine from the outside, but we said no. I think it's hard for us to say we made a rule that we don't follow. We're not the Congress, So I would myself just move along with it, and then maybe hopefully somebody would take a look at this in a offline and discuss it and see if there's something we can do to make this better. I know Tony seems from that committee seems very reasonable. So.
They're all very reasonable people.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe there needs to be some adjustment or something like that. But at least now, I would recommend that we approve it and see what happens.
Well, we have to get through the first motion first.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Well, we have a motion first.
Oh, sorry.
No direct financial
Oh,
impact.
yeah, so we had no,
Looking at.
we didn't have a second.
Standpoint for this year.
I mean, I look at it as second, year 2, year 3, there will be a financial impact in
Yeah,
it.
but we're just talking about FY '23.
But is that all we're responsible for? I think as a committee, we're responsible for the financial health of the town, and that would be for this year, next year, and thereafter. So I would say, is there a financial impact this fiscal year? Probably not. Next year, maybe, and after that,
There's always financial impact to the town
sure.
with everything, but as this article is, they're not asking for any money. And for this year, FY '23, I'm saying no financial impact.
All right, so we have a motion to approve. We have a motion for no direct financial impact. Personally, I tend to side with Jay on this one, just in the sense that I don't see how this would affect our budget right now. I agree, Tom, that depending upon how this goes, it will have an impact on the potential operating budget down the road with, heating expenses and whatnot, and even the repair expenses or replacement expenses themselves. But they're not specifically asking for money here. They've already appropriated the funds. All they're asking for is just, can we requested this permit was denied. Town, what do you think? Can we do this job that we want to do? That's basically all they're asking for. They're asking to spend the money that's already been appropriated, as it's been appropriated, which to me doesn't have a financial impact because the financial impact has already taken place in last year's capital budget or capital plan. Overall, it sounds to me like we need to defer.
Yeah, I think it's I can see both sides. I mean, it's not, I think it is a financial impact, but I think it's minor and it's not a direct one today. So I'm more along the lines of with Tom on this one, and I know we're 2 and 2.
Do you want to just defer to the town meeting?
Maybe we should just defer.
We can hear what, if we're...
Yeah, that's fine. I'll rescind my
Be amendable to that?
I'll
Amenable.
rescind my motion, and you can,
We have a new motion to recommend deferment.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All right. There's a motion to defer. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, we are finally unanimous in that one. Let me let CJ in real quick. All right, moving on to Article 13. I am just going to read the changes, I think, for this one. To see if the town will vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Chapter 113, entitled, quote, Architectural Preservation District. And we are looking to change a little bit of wording in Section B under Section I, where it is, the new wording will say applications must be submitted in accordance with the instructions on the application for certificate to alter. And they are removing the words can be submitted electronically, but applicants shall also provide one hard copy of the application to the planning office. The next change is in Section B, where they're adding, upon receipt of the application, the APDC must review and hold a public hearing on the application. Said hearing to be noticed by an ad published in a newspaper with local circulation 14 days or more before the hearing, striking the words within 45 days of the application submittal, a copy of which shall be filed with the town clerk. The APDC shall hold a public hearing on the application. Said hearing will be noticed by an ad published at least once in a newspaper with local circulation 14 days or more before the hearing. Some minor adjustment of the APDC written determination must, instead of shall, be submitted to the property owner after instead of within 20 days. The close of the public hearing and no later than 90 days from, instead of after, the receipt, instead of submittal, of an application, unless granted a time extension by the owner. Adding the words, the written determination in that case will be no later than 90 days, plus a day for day extension equal to the days granted by the owner. Striking the word in for when. Making its determination, the APDC shall provide a rationale for its action, including a description of how the alteration does or does not meet the standards set forth in 113-9 in the design guidelines. Moving on to section II. The last portion is to change, reads, if the APDC should fail to submit a written determination within 90 days, striking 20 days, of the new terminology receipt of an application, a certificate to alter shall be waived in favor of the property owner. If the property owner had granted an extension during review, the written documentation date shall be no later than 90 days plus a day for day extension as granted by the owner. Removing the words closing its public hearing or within 90 days of the submittal of a certificate or within such further time as the applicant may allow in writing a certificate to alter shall be waived in favor of the property owner or any action relative thereto. Whew. Okay.
This was submitted by the APDC. It's looking to clean up the language in this. I think they think there's some inconsistencies in the timing of application submittal and the requirements. And to provide them the flexibility more at the beginning when applications are submitted. So I think they need to call up hearing almost immediately after receiving an application to meet the deadlines for within the current bylaw language. So this is the condensed version, not the full bylaw. So it's just showing that the changes to those couple paragraphs. I'm sure there'll be plenty of information at town meeting.
I'm sure. Any questions on this one? I have a feeling I see where this one's going to head. Is there a motion?
I'm going to recommend no financial impact.
I'll
Second, yeah.
Yep, second, go ahead.
Motion's made and seconded for no direct financial impact. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Are unanimous. All right, moving on to the fun ones.
This petition.
Article 14, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning map by rezoning a portion of the land located at 199 Massachusetts Avenue from Residence A to Commercial District, so the entire lot is in the Commercial District, as shown on a plan on file at the office of the town clerk, select board, and planning board, or take any other action relative thereto. I have this open. There it is. This is the Chapter Lane property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. As difficult as this is to see. So do we have any idea where the actual property line is on this, just out of curiosity? Or where they're looking to rezone? Is it just this dashed line across the middle?
I know it's like split on the property. It's really hard to tell from this, this map. They brought in a much larger map
Yeah.
the other night.
Okay.
Where you could see. This is going to be a public hearing before the planning board as a requirement under any zoning law, zoning bylaw changes.
Okay.
So that's on October 24th.
Excellent.
And they were one of the people that came in Tuesday night, so you can watch the selectmen's meeting. There's a lot of
Sorry.
questions on and answers on that,
Okay.
that meeting.
Any questions from the committee? I assume this isn't going to change anything in terms of tax revenue or anything, having this changed as a zone? No?
I
Okay.
don't anticipate, nothing I anticipate, but, yeah.
It's not based on the amount of land that they have under that zone, it's based on what's actually operating there. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
Entertain a motion?
I'm going to say no financial impact.
I'll second.
All right, motion's made and seconded for no direct financial impact. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, we are unanimous. All right. And finally, Article 15, to see if the town will vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Chapter 81, entitled Town Meetings as follows, by deleting from Section 81.2, entitled, quote, Meeting and Election Dates, end quote, the sentences, the annual town meeting shall be held on the first Saturday in May, commencing at 9 a.m., and all required reports shall be made at that time. The annual town election shall be held on the third Saturday in May, commencing at 9 a.m. and ending at 5 p.m., close quote. And substituting the following sentences, therefore, quote, the annual town meeting shall be held on the first Saturday in April, commencing at 9 a.m., and all required reports shall be made at that time. The annual town election shall be held on the third Saturday in April, commencing at 7 a.m. and ending at 5 p.m., or take any other action relative thereto. Anything to say on this one?
Oh, a lot. A significant impact on, obviously, everyone who works on the budget throughout the year. It would move our timetable up 5 weeks. So I put together, or Elaine did, my assistant, to show the impact on the budget calendar of where everything would land. Our foundation of our budget for the state revenue is based on the governor's proposal, and we don't receive that until towards the end of January. This schedule, we wouldn't even have that figure to do a preliminary budget. So there's a lot of various impacts to, it would condense a lot of things we do into the fall for timing, for capital planning, getting budgets out to departments, and budgets having to work on things that are for almost a year away. So.
It looks like we're already late if we do get approved. If this does get approved, we're already behind the 8 ball on this one. I will read just the email that was sent to us, just so we have it read out there. So this is from, I believe, the citizen who put forward the petition. And it was just a couple reasons to consider for the change. And this person wrote that the month of May has many activities happening around town that can conflict with people taking the time from their other obligations to attend the town meeting. Many events happen during this month: graduations, weddings, recitals, etc. The warmer weather often sees people outside getting ready for their spring activities, cleaning up the winter debris, readying their gardens, etc. Baseball, softball, and soccer are among the many activities that people are involved in at this time. We now have the bylaw that calls for a special town meeting in the fall where any adjustments to the town's budget can be discussed and voted upon. The majority of the people signing this petition felt we would have more participation in town meeting if town meeting moved back to April. Was it ever in April?
I guess before I came to town, it might have been, but.
No? Okay.
Way back.
So basically to get more people to be involved in the town meeting. Which makes sense, because
Yeah, I understand I certainly understand and completely support the reasoning behind it. The logistics behind it are the difficult part.
Yeah.
Do we have confirmation that if this is approved, it starts we then have special town meeting, or a town meeting scheduled for the first Saturday in April then, 2023?
That's something town council would have to weigh in on, but
Okay.
the way I read it would be yes.
Okay. Is it possible to check with town council ahead of time, just so we have that ready for
Yep.
town meeting? 'Cause I'm sure that, I'm gonna ask that question, so if nobody else does. The schedule that you gave us, okay, it is with the April town meeting, so this is what we would be looking at.
Right.
Okay. Is it doable, technically?
I don't think so, no.
As far as the finance committee is concerned, do we have enough hearing days that we could actually review stuff?
You would have the same amount of hearing days, you would just be hearing you'd be starting 5 weeks earlier.
Okay. We'd be starting in January rather than in February.
Right, because I do the preliminary budget presentation usually in mid-February, so it would be the beginning of January.
Okay. Any other questions?
Other than logistics, is there a financial impact on the budget, financially?
Not having, the closer we get to the end of a fiscal year, the better your estimates are.
Well, I agree.
So I think there's a financial impact there, as your numbers are not as reliable as they could be. So possibly being over conservative, which could be corrected, but there may be things that come up later that are unknown.
If this did went into effect after the first year, after that, would we get back on schedule though? And I know we'd make it short for next year, for '23, but after that, will we just start back on a regular schedule, knowing that we're going to be in April?
No, it would be 5 weeks earlier every year going forward.
Every year?
By charter, there's certain things in the charter that we're required to do, like having the warrant open so many days before town meeting, the budget has to be presented so many days, the financial forecast. So all those things have triggers within.
And what's the interaction with the state budget?
So the state budget, the governor issues his budget proposal at the MMA conference every year, which is the end of January. So not knowing that, we use that as our foundation number for our state number. Because it's always even been a little more than that, but usually never less. So without knowing that number, we'd probably have to use this current year's state number, I would assume.
Okay.
How does that affect? Well, I assume we would have the final number then before technically annual town meeting. And would we have that final number?
No, we would, I don't even think we'd have the house number by then.
What do we normally have
We
by
usually,
the first number, by the first Monday of our
at least the
Saturday?
house number.
Okay.
I'd have to look back, see when the Senate is, if it's the beginning of May.
Okay. So we'd be missing at least a sizable chunk of it. How does that affect, if the number is substantially different from what if we're choosing to use this year's number for next year, assuming that this is passed? And it's a
Revenue
sizable
projections, yeah.
And it's a
So it would
sizable
be
difference that
less.
we actually get. What happens with the money that we've appropriated then?
No, meaning our revenue projections would be less than they probably are in reality, or closer to reality.
Right.
So your budgets would be reflective of that.
But if we've already voted to approve at town meeting all of these budgets, and then the state budget comes out, and it's different, it drastically differs from what we were working off of, or assuming that we were gonna work off of.
You correct that in the fall.
Okay. So in theory, it's still technically doable?
In,
In theory,
I
technically.
am not committing to. That's- Yeah,
Well,
it's, yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's not a good idea for the town.
So to me, there's two questions. One is there a financial impact?
Right.
Direct financial impact? And the second one is, even if the answer is no, that's our job to say.
Right.
But the other one would be does this make sense? And while I see the reason behind it, and I think it's, I understand it, it just doesn't seem, it's going to put an extra burden on not only the staff, but also, and it's going to give our final product at the end, that when we are at the annual meeting, it's going to be more likely that it's going to have, it's going to be less accurate.
Yeah.
It's never going to be 100%, but it's going to be less accurate, and that's not good for the town. So,
Yeah,
that's why you get two votes. One is the finance committee and one is your citizen vote. Yep.
Personal.
I mean, I do think, so maybe there's not a direct financial impact, but I think there is a financial impact in the sense that I think you just have a more rushed planning process. So I actually recommend that we vote to not recommend approval. If we're ready, I'm happy to make that motion.
so you're thinking that because we think that the end product won't be as good, and that will be negative towards the town, the financial health of the town, having a end budget that is could be less accurate or less.
And I think it puts more pressure, more opportunity for mistakes, less maybe robust hearings, et cetera. That's what I'm hearing, and that's makes sense to me. And we also, I mean, I think we've all experienced this, or at least, it was my first time last year, but, there's a lot of things that have to happen right, in a very tight timeline. And, secondly, I'm not convinced we get more people in April. I mean, I think that's, someone would have to demonstrate that. I mean, and that's what they're basing this on. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but I do think it compresses the process, an already kind of, tight process.
How many signatures did they get in total?
Over the required 100, so.
We can expect every one of them at every April meeting. Can we have that contractually signed? So, I agree. If there is an amendment that's made to push this off until April of 2024, to allow for this season's budget season, which is technically already kicked off, or the budget portion of the season that's already kicked off, get through its normal process. If we are moving it back 5 weeks, while yes, I understand that we wouldn't have the House's version of the budget, but we would have at least the governor's version by about a month and a half or so. Is it possible then to, instead of start the process in October, to start the process technically in September of what we normally do, and just kind of move everything back 5 weeks, starting in 2023?
Yeah, so the finance committee, usually summer is your slower time. You're gonna start 5 weeks earlier with any of your discussions normally too, and get into all that.
I guess my question is, while I understand that this 2023 budget schedule is massively compressed because we're already in the middle, we're already starting it. Next year's, in theory, would not have to be as compressed because we would have the extra time that we could allot at the beginning of the fall as opposed to the middle of the fall.
No, that would be the calendar.
For every year moving forward? Okay. And is this starting already earlier than we started this year?
So capital planning is shown on there. It shows it 5 weeks earlier.
So normally, so they're not starting on 8/15, they're usually starting October 1st or something like that,
Right, so
or last week. in
capital
September.
projects were due today. They had their first meeting to review on Monday, and
Okay.
we'll be setting up meetings.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, entertain a motion.
And I'd like to make a motion that we recommend we not approve this Article 15.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion?
I can, what Tom was saying, I agree that if the end product isn't as good, that's going to affect the town, and so I think I can also be against the article, the warrant.
All right, we have a motion and a second to recommend not to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, we made it, this might be our first one, we made it through entirely unanimous. I don't think we've ever done that. All right, that is the conclusion of our articles for the public hearing. Again, I don't think I need a motion to close the public hearing, but we don't need to, I don't believe, correct?
I think you just announced the hearing is closed.
Closed.
All right, so at 8:34 PM, we will close the public hearing.
And there was no one from the public, right, that wanted to comment?
Comment?
Yeah.
Oh, is there any comment, let's unclose it at 8:34. Is there any comment from the public before we close? Don't see any, I don't have anybody waiting in the waiting room. I am going to then go ahead and completely close it. So now at 8:35, we are closing the public hearing. All right. Just so you can not feel like you need to stay any longer, I put you right after.
Oh, thank
So
you.
for the town manager and finance director report.
All right. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So the last select board's meeting, not this past Tuesday, the Tuesday before, I gave some updates. The DPW director is applying for a workplace safety grant, and that's from the Department of Industrial Accidents. The maximum grant award is $25,000. The facilities director, working on a number of projects right now. He's working with the Council on Aging director and the engineer on the ADA patio design behind the senior center. And last week, the week of October 3rd, there was soil testing done, so that may impact the overall cost of that project. So that project was approved for $100,000, and we're waiting for the soil results as well as the engineer's updated estimate for that project.
Is
See
this
what
for
that.
behind the Brooks, the Eagle House?
Yes. Yeah. The public safety chiller project is almost complete. The chiller has been installed. There's just some things that need to be tested and worked out with the rest of that project, but that should be done shortly. That was another capital project. The remediation company removed asbestos at McNally Park, and that building is going to be demolished. That's the structure there with the announcement. So that building itself was deemed unsafe by the building commissioner, and the park commission agreed that that building should come down. So that will be done shortly.
Is that just going to be a flat level, or is there going to be a hole?
There's a concrete pad there, so the concrete pad will remain.
Okay.
So for if they want, whatever the long-term plan for that event, if they want to rebuild something there, it's existing. If not, eventually that would be removed as well. The facilities director is working on getting roof work done at the senior center. That was a capital project. Quotes for the generator for the senior center and condensers at the senior center, carpeting at the public safety building, and is working on a number with the assistant town manager on getting bid packages for a number of projects. The Ritter Break Room project that was put on hold due to a potential leak in the foundation there, but after gutters were redirected, that there's been no water issues at that, in that area. So that's moving forward with Monty Tech doing the work. And they've already been gangbusters there, so they're moving along. The 30 School Street hazardous materials abatement and demolition, the facilities director has been working with our architect on that project and environmental consultant, and we have a draft specification package that we're reviewing currently for that entire project for the rest of the hazardous materials abatement and the demolition. So that's expected to be put out to bid in January, and the work done in early spring, hopefully done by town meeting. Page Street culvert design, McCarty Companies is 90% done with the bid documents for that project. And that was another capital project in '23 for $150,000. Flat Hill Bridge replacement project, our engineer is working with the utility companies on getting all the easements and that work ready, and that should be advertised in March. And that will give the contractor time to fabricate the culvert in time for an October 23 start, when the water in Lake Shirley is lowered and construction is preferred. Legislative updates. I had contacted our legislators about the supplemental budget bill that's being discussed, as well as the economic development bill. I might have gave that update already, but the economic development bill had the funding for the 30 School Street project in it, but that was put on hold due to a 1987 tax measure. I don't know if you've probably heard it in the news, where it kicked in once there was a $3 billion surplus in state revenues, that there was a trigger point that required people get refunds for that. So that economic development bill was put on hold at that time because there was so much borrowing tied to that bill, and there's been no movement on that bill right now. So and they're in informal session right now, and I don't expect probably a vote on that while they're in informal session. And the supplemental budget bill, what I was told when I asked if we should be putting in projects for earmark requests in the supplemental budget bill, that there's no opportunities for local funding in the supplemental budget bill. So.
If we don't get the money for the School Street, would the COVID funds could be used for that?
Well, we have the local appropriation through the capital plan, so we have.
So this would
be
have to spend the money,
right.
which would
It would
give you more-
relieve our local appropriation of $100,000, but we have the available funding through the local appropriation.
So it's coming down,
It is,
one way or another.
yes.
Was it more than that? Was it 250,000?
It was, yeah, significantly more. I think it was 371 for the hazmat and around 150, I think, for the demolition.
At last town meeting, wasn't 250,000 appropriated?
That article was amended.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back to that vote.
Yeah, that
I
was.
don't recall off the top of my head.
Just for
Just, they
demolition?
changed it just to demolish it.
So that's all I have.
Excellent,
Any
thank you.
word on when the line striping painting is going to be done out here?
No, unfortunately, the DPW director has been constantly contacting our contractor and been put off and off.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Brochu, do we have anything from? No, because I think we're just going to do we're going to do the debt capacity, but we can probably do that with Ms. Brochu. Thank you. Ms. Brochu, do we have an update on a finance director report?
I don't, other than the information that was sent to you regarding that estimated debt service from our financial advisors.
Okay, excellent. Which we will go over just in a little bit. All right, moving on. Mr. Carroll has joined us from the Assessor's office as the Principal Assessor. And I invited him to give us just sort of an informal greeting and an informal meeting where we could kind of get a little bit more of an idea as to how the Assessor's office generates income for the town. If there's anything that works with state funding or anything like that, and just give us a little bit more of an idea as to one of our income streams for the town itself. So, Mr. Carroll, the floor is yours. I think I may have to unmute you.
Can you hear me all right?
There you are. Yes. Oh, you muted us. Let's see. Pat, can we get unmuted? I think we're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. I had to switch to my phone. My microphone's not working. But yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know if it makes sense to maybe do a rundown first thing. I don't know how familiar everyone is with the functions of the assessor's office and you know what our annual or day-to-day looks like. So, does that make sense? Start with a quick rundown?
That would be great. Sure.
Sure. So, the assessment department, we have many functions, being commitment of taxes, issuing of abatement, exemptions for real property, personal property, excise, Chapter 61 land, abutters list. But the primary function, and the one that would likely interest you all the most, would be to assess all real and personal property, fair market value, also known as full and fair cash value. So basically the purpose of that is to ensure that all taxpayers in town are paying their fair share of taxes and only their fair share of taxes. So yeah, that's done on January 1st assessment date each year. The assessment's done annually. The information gathered from the assessment and from our analysis is reported to the state annually as well, to ensure we're following valuation guidelines set by them. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. We can get a little bit into our part in generating revenue from the town, or for the town.
Questions on that one so far? No, nothing so far. Excellent.
Okay. So, as I had mentioned in our emails, that the interest by the committee was mainly in the revenue generation, which the assessor's office, the purpose isn't primarily to generate revenue. It's more to kind of what I alluded to earlier. It's more to ensure that the revenue that's generated is done correctly and fairly. So we don't seek to maximize assessments or to maximize revenue generated within the town. Our purpose is to ensure that each property is assessed in a timely and accurate manner. So increases and decreases in the assessed value of properties doesn't actually have a direct impact on town revenue. Once the assessed value of the existing properties in town is determined, that number is used to generate the tax rate to ensure the town's revenue remains consistent while staying within the town guidelines. The exception to that would be what I'm currently working on at the moment, which would be new growth for the town. In addition to the 2.5%, which is Proposition 2.5. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with that, but the town is allowed to raise the levy 2.5% each year. The exception to that would be new growth within the town, which are any items that have not been assessed in the town previously, whether that's new buildings, additions to buildings, things that the town never knew about, but were found out about that year. That would be the contribution by the assessor's office to revenue, outside of just our piece of the puzzle of finding that levy number.
So that 2.5%, are there other towns that drive different levy limits besides the 2.5%, or are they able to do that, or is that completely state set?
That's state set, and it's a maximum, so you can go below your maximum levy. What the reasoning or the benefits downside of hitting that 2.5 number or staying below it are, would probably be a question better answered by Karen. But yeah, that 2.5% is set by the state, and to my knowledge, no towns are able to, outside of a override, no town is allowed to exceed that.
And who's the deciding body that actually chooses to actually levy at the limit? Is that done by the town? Is that done by select board? Is that done by the board of assessors?
That's not done by the board of assessors. It may be a select board matter. Who votes on that directly, though, I'm not sure.
Okay. But it's not set by the assessor's office specifically, you're told what you can levy at.
So we don't actually set the levy, or what we do is we find the total assessed value of the town, which is of course all personal property and all real property parcels, and you find that total assessment number. And from there, once you multiply that number by whatever the tax rate's going to be, that's when you have your levy. So when we find our piece of the puzzle, which is that assessed value, you of course have the end number, the levy that you want to get, whether that's the same as last year, whether it's 2.5% higher than last year. Once you have those two components, you can find the tax rate that we're going to charge the taxpayers.
Got it.
I just wanted to clarify something. You had mentioned something about like new buildings and the 2.5%. So like the building they're building on Leominster Shirley Road, if that building goes in and it's, $10 for the taxes for the year, that means it's 2.5% plus the $10, right? Is that correct? So it's
yeah, so assuming the town does levy to the limit, which would be charging 2.5% in addition to last year's, what that new building will be, that's going to be new growth. So that is in addition to that 2.5%. Anything that's new growth, that is additional revenue for the town. So that's a number that one of the main things I focus on, my department focuses on, is to make sure that we are very thorough and very accurate in gathering that new growth information as the year goes. Because while we can't control that new growth number, we can ensure that it's done thoroughly and accurately to make sure that the town doesn't miss out on any of that revenue. Granted, anything that does get missed or doesn't get finished in time can get picked up for next year's new growth. Anything that hasn't been considered new growth yet can always be new growth. So, if somehow a house got built on a parcel that we didn't know about 10 years ago, if we just found it this year, that's not a very realistic scenario, but hypothetically, if we just found it this year, it would be new growth. But yeah, things can only be new growth once. So what we like to do is make sure that it's thoroughly and accurately gathered to get the ton of additional revenue.
And in the past, has that number been fairly large? I mean, the town has been growing, with apartment complexes and we, some other things. Is that number fairly large, of the new growth relative to the?
Yeah, I mean, it fluctuates, of course, because a substantial project can affect it by 20, 30%. That's not out of the realm of possibility. What we're looking at this year, the numbers that are going to be reported shortly to the state are about $10 million in assessed value. And I believe about $3 million in personal property, which is anything outside of real property. So the real property is the actual real estate, the personal property is anything owned by typically businesses, but there's some exceptions to that as well. And that number, that personal property number is slightly below the average. I would say that the real property number is, I would estimate off the top of my head, I would say that real property number is slightly above average, but there are some outlier years within the past several years that, are close to double that. So it's really about what projects are happening in town. You mentioned the last project on Leominster Shirley, depending on what the finished grade and the value that we can attach to that ends up being. If it's a several $1 million building, then, that alone is going to contribute significantly to the growth of that year.
Are the values that you're setting for real estate or for commercial properties, do those fluctuate based on what you're seeing in surrounding towns, or is that sort of set up as an automatic value, just that you're working within a formula that you add on to incrementally for inflation, or how are you actually arriving at, say, a cost per square foot or something like that?
Sure. So from an assessment perspective, we use a max appraisal system. And so the two factors that come into play there are a cost analysis. So what is the building actually worth from building the building standpoint? And then the other factor is, of course, the market. What we use for that, it's a CAMA system, computer assisted mass appraisal. The company we use is called Vision. And there are many factors that go into each building type and each property type, each parcel, pretty much every factor you can think of, there is either an adjustable, space for it within the parcel on that system, or there's a table running in the background that's telling the system what factor to apply to it. So everything from, of course, your depreciation code, how much is depreciated compared to what it was when it was new, what are the floors like, what's the siding, what's the roof, what neighborhood is it in, and how does that neighborhood, in terms of the town as a whole, how does that affect it, how does being on the water affect it. Everything ties in and either has something adjustable within the parcel or has a table in the background that's influencing that value. And typically what you see when, we're running comps, trying to figure out those tables, trying to determine base values, square footages, we try to keep it within the town, but of course there are unique situations where, say you have an enormous industrial complex where there isn't another one compared to the town. That's a unique situation where you might look at comps in either, depending what fits best, either Pittsburgh and Leominster, or maybe you might look over in Townsend or Groton, wherever you can find something and you feel like as many pieces as possible match, that's where you might go. But typically 95% of the time when you're looking at comps, you want to look within the town.
Okay.
If possible.
Any other questions anyone can think of?
No?
New growth, we only see that when a project is completed.
Typically, growth is calculated at the completion of a project, typically. And that's based on the assessment date, which is January 1st of the previous year. So for example, right now we're setting 2023 values. January 1st, 2022 is the assessment date that we're using. So whatever stood at that time is what influences the assessment. The exception to that would be project due to Chapter 653, I believe. We are able to assess until July 1st if a project was completed greater than 50% within that 6-month gap.
And where are you at assessing the town? You do a third of the town every year?
So each property has a new value in January 1st of every year. So it gets reassessed every year. In terms of actually visiting properties, the state requires that gets done, every single property gets seen every 10 years. So while a new value is attached January 1st of every year, if you mean actually going out and visiting and getting a new photo and knocking on the door and trying to get in, that's going to be once every 10 years. Or sooner, if, for example, there's a major permit or, a sale that we want specifically to go in and look at. But if it's just a property that hasn't had anything like that happen, it's at least once every 10 years.
Following up with Jay's question, if once construction is finished and occupancy is taken, or just construction is finished on the building, whether it's commercial or residential? Is it just once construction is completely done, even if no one's living in it or working in it or renting it?
If something were to be partially completed and the project were to stop, that is something we would assess. But the date that we go by, assuming a normal pace of actually constructing the property, we would go based on a certificate of occupancy or whatever similar documentation the building department would give. So I don't know if it's technically called a certificate of occupancy, if it's an industrial or commercial building, but whatever the equivalent is, once that project is signed off and completed, that's the date that we go by, whether that's to calculate if it can be that year's new growth or if it would need to be the next year's new growth. And that's the year that we would tax, for example, supplemental bills on, which is another Chapter 653 component that allows us to tax on a prorated basis projects that were completed or that increase in value greater than 50% in between the assessment date and January 1st.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else?
It's good.
All I got. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. It's good to
Yeah,
get
no
this kind of
problem.
information
If
out.
anyone has any questions, feel free to give my office a call. Happy to chat.
Will do for sure. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
You as well, thank you. All right, last order of business, debt capacity forecasting review at 9:03, 9:02. So, Ms. Brochu, thank you for sending this out to us, and for having the financial planning group put this together. To be honest, I've only had a chance to do a cursory look over this. I don't know if anyone else in the committee has actually been able to do a deeper dive into it. But I suppose at first, would you mind just kind of talking us through generally what they put together for us?
Well, I mean, what our financial advisor did was he looked at our existing debt to determine what we would be able to afford based on our debt capacity policies. So, in the analysis that he did, the number that he came up with as a principal amount is $42 million, and he actually provided us with 2 different funding scenarios. And he did have, like as an example, the $42 million with the two financings, he had the date of the issue being 2024 for $20 million, with the first debt payment being due in fiscal year 2025. And then he had the second issue, the second amount of $22 million being issued in fiscal year 2032, with payments beginning in 2033. Now, of course, this all can be pushed forward, or I guess what I'm trying to say is we tried to provide the finance committee with an analysis of what we thought you were looking for. So when David Eisenthal went in to look at this, based on our policies, like I said, the number that he came up with for a principal was $42 million in each one of the scenarios, and he estimated 4.5% interest, and he also treated the issues as if they were excludable debt, given the size of the borrowing and the nature of what we thought it would be. As an example, if it was a municipal building or the Turkey Hill Elementary School, then that would certainly be excludable debt. And the term that he estimated for each one of those, well, I shouldn't say each one of those projects, because it doesn't necessarily talk about those projects, but those have definitely been discussed. So the term that he used for each one of the borrowings that he gave us an analysis on was a 30-year term, given the fact that that would be similar to a school building project where you would do a 30-year term, because that asset, you would at least assume, would last at least that long, if not longer. So he provided the analysis on the debt, and then I just took the principal and interest payments that he provided us with on each one of those issues and plugged it into our existing debt, so that we could just show you that we were within our policy guidelines on each one of those funding scenarios. So I guess in conclusion, what I would say is, based upon our existing debt, David Eisenthal put together this analysis, and in his opinion, at this point in time, the dollar amount of the principal that we could borrow would be that $42 million figure.
Excellent, okay. And then, so if I'm reading this correctly, then on the very far right-hand side where you have the remaining capacity, that's what's left over between the existing capacity we have and then less the 20 million and the 22 million, or on the other side, the 20, 10, and 12 options.
Correct.
So that, in theory, would be enough to bring us, is that just the excludable debt to bring us up to our 11% of excludable debt, or is that the aggregate debt at 14%?
No, if you look at the summary that I did, which showed the existing debt service and then the additional 42 million with the two financings and the additional 42 million with the three financings, if you look at, as an example, if you look at the middle table, where it has additional $42 million, two financings, excludable debt, you will see in 2025, which is the first year that we would be paying debt service on the estimated debt that Mr. Eisenthal provided us, the regular debt service percentage remains at 0.72, but the excludable debt goes up to 10.95, and the aggregate of the two would be the 11.62%. So our policy for regular debt is 4%, we would be at 0.72%. Our cap on excludable debt is 11%, and with this analysis, it would be 10.95%, and the aggregate, according to our policy, shouldn't be any more than 14%, and it would be at 11.62. So the top table that says existing debt service tells you what our percentages are right now, and then the bottom two show you what the percentages would be if we did the $42 million with the 2 financings or the $42 million with the 3 financings. And again, this is taking into account that we would actually do, start issuing debt in 2024 with debt service payments beginning in 2025 in each one of those scenarios.
And that lines up, I assume, with the primary school falling off the debt schedule, correct? Roughly?
The primary school falls off the debt schedule, I believe, in 2024, yes.
Okay. So at this point, the basic recommendation is that we can afford about a $42 million price tag split up in any number of ways that we want over the next
Right.
30
And
to 40
again,
years.
the date of issuance and all that sort of stuff can be adjusted to move it out to when it actually happens or whatever the case may be, but at least in his opinion at this point in time, based upon our existing debt, he is saying that the principal amount that we could afford in order to still be within our existing financial policies would be the $42 million.
And then it looks like around 2043, 2044, there, we start to kind of accumulate back up to a decent amount of capacity available again. Which
And
is,
that's true because all of our existing debt everything that we have right now will mature in 2047. So in the information that I provided to you with the different funding scenarios, that debt service is only carried out to 2047. And then the only remaining debt that we would have would be the debt on his analysis that goes beyond that point. So yes, we would see capacity come way back up right around that time.
okay. Well, speaking specifically for myself, this is exactly what I was hoping to see. So I thank you and the financial planner both. This is perfect. This is exactly what I was hoping to get out of this. Was an actual,
Well,
how much can we afford?
That's good to know. And again, going out beyond 2047, I mean, it's a long way out, so who knows what will happen between now and then, but we would have significant capacity to borrow more, but at least from now until the 2040s at some point, the feeling is that the $42 million would be what we could afford at this point in time and still be within our policies.
Yeah, I was going to say that I agree with the chairman. I think this is really helpful, Karen, so thank you for doing this. A couple of questions from me. Is Unibank, that's our financial advisor?
Yes,
And that's the financial advisor we've used in the past?
yes.
And okay, are they on, just curious, are they on retainer, or did you have to get charged for this analysis?
No, we did not get charged for the analysis. What happens is any debt that is issued, there's obviously fees that they receive as a result of the issuance of that debt.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple questions on some of the finer points of this, but I think it's very helpful to get, some round numbers of the ballpark of what we could afford. So this was all done under excludable debt and under the kind of, what do we call it, the regular debt or the regular debt. There was no debt there and there's some capacity there. So there is some additional capacity. I also just note again, this is, if you look at the total debt service for each of the issues, it's level debt service, meaning the principal and interest equal, pretty much the same amount every year. And I think, there are ways to structure the debt to kind of make it conform more with your existing debt service, so you could potentially build some extra capacity, but, you know, I think that's a fine point. And so, you know, I take the kind of 40 million ballpark as a good number for us to keep in our heads as we think about capital, you know, big capital expenditures, you know, over the next 10 years, really.
Yeah.
Do you look at it that way, Karen?
I do, I do, and he did, I guess from a budgeting standpoint, the level debt service, I think it's better for the town because I just think from a budgeting standpoint, it's easier if the debt service is level throughout the term of the debt. But of course, I mean, it can be structured in any way. If we had a year that, you know, our percentages were way down, we could certainly structure the debt so that we're paying more principal in that year than what we would be going out in the later years. Because if we get to a point where we have a big project that we paid off and we want to replace that with new debt service for whatever project may come along, then we could do that as well.
Yeah, and when I looked at one of the prior spreadsheets you sent of our existing debt, a lot of those debt issuances are structured with the principal kind of, and the principal and the debt service kind of backloaded, and I think, but anyway, it's again, it's.
Yeah, it's done, it's definitely been done both ways.
Yeah, okay, got it. That's all I have. Very, very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, I found this very helpful. I'm on the Municipal Building Design Committee, and I know one of the things that we're looking at right now is, you know, what kind of work and expense, we haven't got to the expense part, but our goal is to limit the expense, obviously, as best we can, but still get the quality of the infrastructure up. So I think this kind of information will be good to help us and maybe to understand, you know, what kind of thing. The other big part, I think, also is it sounds like the school committee is looking at doing something with Turkey Hill, and that's probably, I've heard, 5-10 years in the future. So we have to make sure we also know that, because obviously that's the same borrowing capacity that we're talking about, whether it be municipal property or school property. So this was really great. And is this something that if the municipal building design said, hey, we got these things and we're projecting these numbers, could you run us a spreadsheet of what this would look like if we were borrowing money in a particular fashion? Would that be difficult to do?
No, and both him and I would be happy to put together the same types of schedules for anything that the municipal building committee would come up with for numbers, because, I mean, we just wanted to make sure, and I'll be happy to tell David this as well, we wanted to make sure that the information that you were getting from us is what you wanted to see. Because it gets a little confusing, because from our perspective, we're always working on actual amounts that we're looking to borrow and plugging those into schedules and determining the best way to do the borrowing. So to take the back-end approach and go in the opposite direction is a little different than what we typically do, but both of us would be happy to do whatever we can with any information that we're provided by you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, will the select board see this or some version of it?
I would say yes. I'm not sure if it's been passed on to the select board yet, but Heather's there, so you can certainly check with her, but I would think that they would see this as well, yes.
Okay.
She actually left for the night.
Oh, did she?
She did. Can't say I blame her.
Yeah,
Exactly.
To me, it's these are the kind of numbers I think we want to be promulgated so that people have this in their head, including the select board.
Yeah, I'm happy to forward it on to, well, basically the select board, because they're involved with the municipal design committee, they're involved with the
Yeah,
capital
sure.
planning committee, and the school committee too, actually, the school committee as well, I think. Do we have the option to send this out just kind of town-wide to department heads and whatnot, or just, I suppose, just is there a sort of a server list that should get this, or that can get this pretty easily?
I would say the answer to that question is yes, but I would defer to Heather on that because she could send it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying I don't have like those town-wide lists, but I'm certain that Heather at least has a department head list. And he would certainly get the information to the select board. I can't see why this couldn't be passed on to like the municipal building committee and whatever other committees may find the information useful.
Well, my plan was to pass this on to the municipal
Absolutely.
building committee at our
Yeah,
next
you
meeting.
can certainly
So,
do that.
which would then go to
Yep.
Mr. Jeffries and, you know, if he wanted.
Yeah, that was kind of
And
my
then- And then
thought.
if he wants to give the full, he could do that too, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important for them especially to know, okay, this is a number that we can begin with. And then, obviously, a lot of things can change, but it's a nice starting point and it's, gives us a good place to move to. And I think that's really what we need is so we're not like just, you know, guessing.
Oh, and I think too, when you're looking at the larger projects, you would always, at least in my opinion, include those in excludable debt estimates. And as far as the regular borrowing goes, we've been fortunate enough that, you know, we've been able to build up some reserves. We've had some pretty significant free cash certifications. So we've had the ability over the last several years to pay for some pretty large purchases that you wouldn't, that I guess I should say in years past, we would have borrowed for, and there would have been costs associated with those borrowings that we haven't had to do because we've been fortunate to have free cash and reserves and funding capital within the levy and using some of our levy limit to go towards capital. So, because in years past when I was here, there were many things, and people that have been around for a while know this, we borrowed for everything. I mean, we borrowed for whiteboards at the school that cost $4,000 and paid for, you know, 10 years.
Yeah.
So we're in good financial shape, I guess is what I'm saying. So I can't see any reason why, at least for the next several years, we would be doing any regular borrowing.
The one that comes to mind is the fire truck replacement, correct? That's the intention is to pay for that directly out of free cash, basically?
In cash or you know, transfer money out of the vehicle equipment stabilization fund, because we've been putting money in there with the thought that when we do have to make those large purchases, we'll have those funds available.
Okay. So is the idea with the three financings, not to say that this is our limit, but with a $10 million purchase and, for example, 2028 as you have listed here, is the sort of assumption that we can effectively swing an $8 million purchase out of transfers or cash and we wouldn't have to do any type of financing on that, or is it probably closer to like a $3 or $4 million purchase?
No, the three financings, the total of the principal is still the 42 million.
I know, this was just sort of a curiosity for what we have available in free cash and in accounts that we could spend, and because I believe the fire truck is supposed to be, is it close to $2 million or something like that? If I'm not mistaken.
I would say that's probably the case at the time that it's purchased, but I don't think that we would ever have well, unless we had a significant buildup in our reserves, but I don't think there would ever be a time that we could fund
Okay,
that large of a purchase.
okay, without proper planning.
In a single year without doing some borrowing.
Got it, okay. But in a situation where we have been preparing for this and we've been setting money aside for this exact purchase, that's where we can actually pay for it out of pocket rather than have to finance it.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions?
You know, I guess as I think about this being circulated around to different folks, I wonder, Karen, if it's worth kind of PDFing these two pieces together, and then, you know, is there some kind of summary, you know, few bullet points on, you know, we asked Unibank advisors to, you know, run a few different scenarios, the debt capacity, level debt service, et cetera, you know, to illustrate something. I guess I'm trying to get, you know, I think some people, especially folks that maybe aren't quite as financially,
You mean just the summary page?
yeah,
that
well, I'm
kind of-
just thinking like some bullet point summaries of like what should people take from this? You know, and the reason I say that is I think some people are just not great with numbers or don't think in numbers, and, you know, it might be helpful just to orient them to what they're looking at.
Yeah, and maybe what I could do is look at the original request from the finance committee, because,
Yeah.
I mean, all of the information that was provided to you was based on the request that we received from Evan. So kind of summarize that and then just go into a little bit of a detailed summary on the information that's actually there. But yes, I can do that.
Yeah, because like the 20 and the 22, I mean, it maxes out that, you know, 11% basically, right? I mean, and then, you know, so that's really the limit at that particular point.
Until 2047
Yeah,
or
until,
so,
you
when
know,
you could,
until
when you
you-
drop back down to like 8.5% or so, when you could theoretically add in another expense at that point, but again, that's 20 years down the road, so.
Right.
I almost wonder if it would be helpful to put something in the warrant booklet for the town. Rather than just kind of restrict it to town committees and whatnot, to let the entire town kind of have some sort of an idea as to what's happening with our available spending.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, for the annual though, not for the special, right? Because I don't think.
Probably. I
I
think,
don't know that we'd be able to get that done for the warrant that needs to be mailed out for the special.
when does it, that has to be in?
Definitely, I'll talk with Heather about it on Monday, but
Oh, you're right,
I
because
think that the warrant for the special town meeting may be too soon.
it has to go out on like November 1st, and it has to be at the printer, what, 2 weeks before that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure, but I know that it's coming up soon.
Okay. Well, that gives us more time to write something than if it's for annual town meeting. Unless it's in April.
I'm gonna have auditors here next week, so my whole week next week will be spent with my friends.
Good luck.
Yeah. It'll be fine.
Any other questions for Karen?
No.
Thank you very much.
Again, yes, thank you so much for this, Karen.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to minutes. At this point, I haven't seen an update with the 9:20 minutes. Jay, you brought up a good point about what the consensus was in there, and I shared the same sentiment. So I think we should hold off. The idea was that we were sort of unanimous in our ideas for ARPA spending, but I think it was more just kind of a discussion that we had over the ARPA spending, and there was general agreement, but I don't think we had a direct agreement as the finance committee to say this is what we think we should do.
Yeah, I don't think we
I
did.
think we were more just in agreement of, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good place to spend the money. So I'll check in and see if we can get that fixed. And then on the 15th, you were there. So,
To the corner.
exactly. I suppose I would entertain a motion to approve, or not approve, the 8:28 and the 9:15 minutes with the amendment that Jay Simeoni was present on the 15th.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, any conversation? All right, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so the minutes from 8:28 and 9:15 are approved pending an amendment to the 9:15. Committee reports. Really quickly, Board of Health has met. There wasn't much that happened. We approved some variances, so nothing that really directs the Finance Committee directly. Capital Planning, Dave Passios was on at the beginning of the meeting, so he already gave his update for capital plan. Council on Aging, I've just added myself onto it. I have not had a chance to reach out to them to see if they've done anything, but I will make some contact for the next meeting and make sure I get an update from them as well. DPW, Jay?
No, I reached out to him yesterday, but I did not hear back.
Okay. Green Communities?
Well, on all the ones that I had, the only one I have is the municipal building, and I sent everybody on this committee the spreadsheet that was presented to the select board that actually we presented, the municipal building committee presented, and Mr. Roy did the presentation and did a great job. Basically, just an overview is that we're, our main focus is to keep the, obviously to build and improve the infrastructure as we need it, but also to not build any, as much or any if we can avoid, but probably some, new space, maybe not new buildings, maybe reduce the number of buildings. We're talking about the Burke House being, maybe not being there. Nothing is obviously final. But also keeping, without a doubt, keeping the Ritter and keeping this town hall buildings. This town hall would probably be used for meetings, just like we're doing now. And Ritter would either be the town hall or the school committee, and probably not, but there was a talk about building a new town hall where the old primary was. Seems that the select board liked what we called the hybrid one, which is the, if you look at the spreadsheet, was one at the end, which basically didn't build the new town hall, but made the Ritter, the school and the town hall. They built an annex to that. And we actually had Tony from the Architectural Design Committee, and he was saying, because I was like going, well, if you don't like the windows, you're not going to like us building a whole new building. But he said that, he actually said that that wouldn't be a problem, because as long as the building didn't kind of try to mimic it, and you could see, oh, that's the addition, then they're more likely to say, yeah, that's okay. I guess, so he said it can be done, and he doesn't think it will be a major hurdle. And obviously, he said that they know that we need the space. So, very interesting. As I said before, these financial numbers that we got will be very helpful to the committee, and we're pressing ahead. I hopefully, we'll get somewhere soon, but it's a lot of stuff and so many moving pieces.
Thank you very much. Anything from the library?
No, I don't have any updates.
Okay. Going to assume that the Parks Committee has met, but we'll get an update from Chris later. Anything from sewer? Anybody have anything from sewer? I have not seen anything.
I watched the video quickly last night, today. They had a public hearing for an extension that they approved. And then they talked a little bit about, the pond view, the legalities with that, and the ZBA meeting, et cetera. And they just reviewed about their ARPA request they had submitted to the selectmen. and they talked a little about the issue of Whalum still with the clay pipes and the I&I, and trying to brainstorm a little bit what they're doing there, or would like to do there to fix that.
Okay, excellent. I unfortunately was not able to watch the school committee meeting for the last one, so I have no idea what's happened from that one, but I'm sure it was an entertaining meeting. And I will catch up for the next one. Ideas for future meetings. At this point, we have, let me go and check real quick.
October 27th. November 10th.
We do. I'm just checking to see who we have invited. So on October 27th, we have a tentative meeting with the DPW director for another impromptu meeting, and also just to meet the DPW director, and the school department as well, with originally what was in theory going to hopefully be a 5-year plan update, but they need to obviously work that out with the school committee first, which makes perfect sense. But at least we are penciled in to have the school department come and talk to us as well on the 27th, just to try and get through at least some of the functionality portion of their budget meeting that we'll have with us in the late winter. At least the preliminary stuff to get through that one, so we can just kind of focus on the numbers when their budget meeting actually happens. Other than that, that was about what I've got for now. Is there any public comment from committee?
I have one quick one. Just, Mr. Beardmore, who was on the committee at the time, mentioned a couple of weeks ago the passing of John Mayle, who was the chairman of this committee a number of years ago and did a lot of other things, very well-loved and respected person. There's going to be a service for him over at United Parish across from Town Hall on Saturday the 15th at 11. Just wanted to make the community aware of that. If you want to show up, that would be great.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the committee? The only thing I would like to add is that we currently have 2 vacancies sitting on the finance committee without anyone that's applied for talent bank forms. And as the issue that we had this evening was that since we have 1 member who's on vacation, we need 4 people for a quorum. And without that, we are not able to have our meetings. So if there's any interest whatsoever, I highly recommend going to the town website. The talent bank forms are very easy to fill out. We could certainly use the help, and it would be very much appreciated. Any public comment from the public? I don't see anyone on Zoom, and it's in the audience, so I'm going to assume not. Upcoming meetings, we have our regularly scheduled meeting for October 27th and then November 10th. And then following that, we have November 15th as a special town meeting. And then we'll move on from there. And we'll be quickly into budget season. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 9:36 PM, we are